Right, so as several media outlets carry an outline story of 7 aid workers having been killed in Gaza by an IDF strike, what fewer are focusing on, or have focused on so far in reports that you may have seen, and partly that's to do with this story being constantly updated, of course, is that of the 7 aid workers, there wasn't one British aid worker killed amongst them, but 3 of them were British. At least one was Australian and another Polish. The only Palestinian aboard was the driver. Israel have offered condolences for these tragic deaths, but with the number of aid convoys targeted by the IDF over the last 6 months, the fact aid has been stopped from coming through repeatedly via road crossings, this is too much to take at face value. And with images of the downed aid vehicle showing very much what appears to have been a surgical strike, who is foolish enough to take Israeli spokespeople at their word on that? Right, so plenty of UK news outlets are talking about this aid worker attack, referring to tragic deaths, referring to what the Israelis have said on this matter, even when they knew at least one Briton had been killed. In fact, that number has risen to 3 Britons killed in this attack by the Israeli Defence Force. Here's what Israel themselves have said first, as reported by Sky about 15 minutes ago at time of writing. Israel has commented on the strike that killed 7 aid workers in Gaza earlier. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari offered deepest condolences to the founder of the charity World Central Kitchen over the tragic deaths of its aid workers. We also express sincere sorrow to our allied nations who have been doing and continue to do so much to assist those in need, he added. Mr Hagari insisted the IDF is a professional military committed to international law, adding that the incident is being reviewed at the highest levels to understand the circumstances of what happened and how it happened. He praised World Central Kitchen as doing critical work on the front lines of humanity, also noting the charity had been among the first to help Israelis after the massacre of 7th of October. We will get to the bottom of this and we will share our findings transparently, he said. That's the message as delivered by Daniel Hagari, aka Mr Pointy, as you might be more familiar with him, the sort of guy who points at calendars and calls them Hamas duty rosters, or points at Hamas laptops that have Hebrew keyboards instead of Arabic ones, which is not at all suspicious. A trustworthy sort he is, absolutely not. What is true from that statement, I don't buy any of their sorrow or condolences, is that these people were part of an aid convoy working on behalf of the food charity World Central Kitchen, a global food charity founded in 2010 by the Spanish-American celebrity chef Jose Andre, to provide food in the wake of natural disasters primarily. The Haiti earthquake disaster is another notable example of where they've been, though the disaster in Gaza is anything but a natural one, of course. Fortunately, we don't have to rely on Western media to get to the bottom of this, merely broadcasting Israel's response as they're doing. How about we get a response from World Central Kitchen on this? They, after all, are the ones deploying these people. What do they have to say about the loss of their people?
Central Kitchen has described the killing of its staff members as a targeted attack. In a statement, it says the team was moving in a deconflicted zone in 2 armored cars and another vehicle bearing the organization's logo. And despite coordinating its movements with the Israeli army, the convoy was bombed while leaving a warehouse. It says this is an attack not only on our organization, but on humanitarian organizations. And the charity says it is unforgivable. World Central Kitchen is pausing its operations immediately in the region and will be making decisions about the future of its work soon.
So the aid workers were leaving a food warehouse in Gaza. They were already in Gaza. I'll expand on that point in a moment. They were in trucks well marked up as World Central Kitchen. Israel knew their route, had been notified of their departure, and obviously knew what they were doing, travelling through a deconflicted zone, as it was described. So it was already cleared. No warfare going on, or supposed to be going on, in that particular area, and as such the World Central Kitchen have called this a targeted attack. Israel knew exactly who they were, what they were doing, where they were going, and just as aid has been stopped at the gates from getting into Gaza, and aid convoys have been targeted throughout Gaza, and indeed Israel has faced accusations of setting up food aid deliveries in order to continue their genocide and attack people desperate for food, the so-called flower massacres, as you might recall from a few weeks ago. Here's another short clip. Check out the damage on this vehicle and tell me that's not a targeted attack.
An Israeli airstrike kills 6 foreign aid workers and their Palestinian driver in central Gaza. The NGO World Central Kitchen says it's pausing all operations.
That was a very precise hole in that truck, I felt. Doesn't at all look accidental or random, and indeed the vehicle's livery for World Central Kitchen was everywhere there. We aren't looking at a tragic accident here, we're looking at a war crime. Yet another Israeli effort to stop aid moving to the people who need it in Gaza, who we know are starving to death. I said I'd come back to that point about the aid having already been in Gaza, which you might be wondering about since settlers keep blocking aid from travelling through the Rafah crossing, of course. Well, there are 7 crossings from Israel into Gaza. Perhaps they've opened more as requested. There's been no excuse really for Israel to have not done that, but no, that is not the case. You might remember that the US have been building a pier or a dock in Gaza with the permission of Israel. Well, it seems World Central Kitchen had preempted this move because they built their own dock apparently, and actually the job of these aid workers apparently was the coordination of some 400 tons of aid that had arrived via this new sea route to come from Cyprus to this World Central Kitchen pier. Now this opens up a whole new can of worms really, to the true intent of the dock the US are building, because aid has come in by sea to the World Central Kitchen pier, which is supposedly the purpose of the dock the US are building. That's being built for aid, isn't it? Yet that aid, or the aid workers, have been clearly, to my mind here, deliberately targeted. So tell me again why the US, with Israel's permission, having never allowed the building of docks before in Gaza, are building one now. I really do smell a rat with it. I think it's to get arms in myself, but we'll wait and see on that, won't we? Even if it is for aid, though, who's to say Israel aren't going to target more aid workers trying to deliver from there? Everything Israel does seem geared to doing is to prevent aid getting through. And life is so cheap to them that they don't care who dies trying to get it in, though. 3 Britons, an Australian. The Australian PM Anthony Albanese has called it a human tragedy. Wrong words in my view. It's clearly a war crime. Aid workers have been deliberately targeted, surely. There was a Polish person there, and a US-Canadian dual national is apparently the 7th person, aside from the Palestinian driver. Media reports on that at the time of writing seem a little bit wobbly and uncertain. But that is what it is it not? More details for that will come out, I dare say, as the day wears on. Not available to me at the time of writing. Anyway, aid workers are supposedly protected under international law. So what are the response from the government then? UK Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron says news of the deaths of 7 aid workers is deeply distressing. The aid workers were working in Gaza for charity World Central Kitchen. The charity said earlier that 1 Briton was among the dead, but Lord Cameron's statement talks about news of British nationals being killed in the attack. British nationals are reported to have been killed. We are urgently working to verify this information and will provide full support to their families, he said. These were people who were working to deliver life-saving aid to those who desperately need it. It is essential that humanitarian workers are protected and able to carry out their work. We have called on Israel to immediately investigate and provide a full, transparent explanation of what happened. Deeply distressing, so says Dodgy Dave. Again, avoiding what appears to be the obvious conclusion, that this is a war crime because we can't criticise Israel. If this had been Russia, though, it would be another story, of course. That call on Israel to immediately investigate, though, have you really called for that? Did you? Have you? You see, in response to a press office request to see if Cameron had followed the suit of his Australian counterparts in dragging their Israeli ambassador in to answer questions about this, submitted by this channel's good friend Squawkbox, the UK government has actually done no such thing at all. How about Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer? And they themselves commented on this. Nope. Starmer's too busy shoving union flags in our faces, and Sunak is repeating nonsense he's already announced on childcare. Both are avoiding the issue. The main party official accounts are just as silent. David Cameron's Labour friend of Israel, opposite number, David Lammy, hasn't said a word on this either at time of writing. We can but hope they buck up before this video goes out, but I won't be holding my breath. Well, silence too often is complicity, and without criticism, just a little bit of hand-wringing. People in this country, looking at 3 of our fellow citizens dead at Israel's hands, ought to be asking all main party leaders, but especially the 2 most likely to be PM come the general election, whose side exactly are you on when you aren't speaking out for your own people? And where Cameron's hand-wringing is one thing, his resignation is another. If this pathetic response to the deaths of British aid workers wasn't repugnant enough, his failure to call in Zippy Hotovelli to answer questions about it, continuing to supply military aid to Israel after lawyers had told him Israel was breaching humanitarian law, as appears to be the case, is another story entirely, as this video recommendation will tell you all about. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.